The night on the frontier outpost was colder than usual. David walked along the edge of the forest with his rifle slung over his shoulder. The human outpost was a small one, built on the border of alien territory where the woods were dense and the stars above shone brighter than anywhere else. His patrol was supposed to be routine. The only sounds were the hum of insects and the crunch of his boots on the ground. David was used to long, lonely nights. Most soldiers complained about being sent to this posting, but David liked the quiet. There was no war here, only the possibility of one. His duty was to watch the border, report unusual movements, and make sure no smugglers or raiders crossed into human lands. As he reached a clearing, David stopped. Something felt wrong. The forest ahead was too still. The night air seemed to hold its breath. He lowered his hand to his weapon and scanned the shadows. Then he saw movement. A small figure rushed between the trees, fast but stumbling as if tired or wounded. David crouched low and followed the movement with his eyes. Whoever it was carried no light, only a faint shimmer as if a thin field of energy wrapped around them. He had seen cloaking devices before, but only in reports. The shimmer meant the device was failing. Whoever was using it was desperate. The figure tripped and fell into the clearing, landing on the grass. The cloak broke with a spark of blue light. David's breath caught in his throat. Lying before him was not a smuggler or soldier. It was a young alien woman, dressed in torn garments of silver fabric. Her dark hair spilled across the ground, and her eyes, sharp and glowing faintly, looked up at him in fear. She scrambled back, raising her hand as if to ward him off. "Stay away," she said, her voice trembling but commanding. David did not lift his weapon. He kept his hands where she could see them. "I am not here to hurt you," he said calmly. "You are on human land. Who are you?" She hesitated. Her breathing was heavy, and her cloak device sparked weakly on her wrist. "I cannot tell you. If you know my name, you will give me away." David frowned. "You are running from someone." She pressed her lips together and nodded once. Her eyes darted toward the forest as if hunters might appear at any moment. David thought fast. If she was from the alien empire, then finding her here could mean trouble. If he reported her, his commanders would take her into custody. But something about the fear in her eyes told him this was more than just an intruder. "What will happen if I leave you here?" David asked. "They will find me," she whispered. "And if they find me, I will never be free again." Her words stirred something in David. He had grown up believing the alien empire was powerful, strict, and unyielding. To hear that even their own kind ran from it made him pause. He took a slow step closer. "Tell me your name." She lowered her gaze, then finally spoke. "Myra." The name carried weight in his mind, though he could not place it at first. Then a memory struck him. The alien queen had a daughter named Myra. He had heard it mentioned in reports but never thought he would meet her. If this was truly her, then the danger was far greater than he imagined. David could have turned and called for backup. He could have ended his patrol by doing what was expected. But instead, he reached out his hand. "If you want to live, follow me." Myra looked at him with suspicion. "Why would a human help me?" "Because," David said firmly, "sometimes the right thing is not the easy thing." For a long moment, she stared at his hand. Then, slowly, she placed her own in his. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly, but there was strength in her grip. David led her through the trees, moving quietly toward the hills that hid old caves once used by miners. As they moved, Myra kept glancing behind them, her fear clear. David noticed the way she carried herself, the way her eyes darted with sharp intelligence. She was no ordinary runaway. When they reached the caves, David guided her inside. The walls were damp, and the air smelled of earth and stone. He lit a small lantern and set it down. Myra collapsed onto a rock, breathing heavily. "They will not stop," she said. "They will search every corner of this world until they find me." David studied her. "Why are you running? You are the daughter of a queen. What could drive you here?" She raised her chin, her eyes fierce despite her exhaustion. "Because I will not be a prisoner dressed as a princess. My life is mine, and I refuse to be used as a tool for power." David said nothing at first. Her words were bold, spoken with conviction. He could see the fire in her, a fire that reminded him of the same spirit humans carried when they fought for their freedom long ago. "You chose the hardest path," David said quietly. "I chose the only path that belongs to me," Myra replied. The silence in the cave grew heavy, broken only by the sound of dripping water. Outside, the forest whispered with distant noises. The hunters were out there. David knew it was only a matter of time before they came close. Myra pulled her cloak device from her wrist and set it down. It sparked weakly, then died. "This will not hide me anymore," she said bitterly. David knelt beside her. "Then we make our own plan. You are safe here for now. Rest while you can." She looked at him, studying his face as if trying to read his soul. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Thank you, human." "David," he corrected. "My name is David." Her lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "Then thank you, David." The night stretched on, but neither of them truly rested. Beyond the hills, the Empire's trackers moved closer. The choice David had made helping Myra instead of reporting her had already bound their fates together. The morning sun crept through the cracks of the cave, painting faint golden lines across the rough stone walls. David had been awake for hours, listening to the sounds outside. The forest was alive with birds and the rustle of leaves, yet beneath those natural sounds he felt something heavier and unease that lingered like a shadow. Myra stirred from where she had rested against the wall. Her silver clothes, once elegant, were torn and dirted from her flight. Her eyes opened slowly, and for a moment, she looked almost peaceful. But then her gaze sharpened, and she sat upright, scanning the cave as if expecting an ambush. "You are safe," David said quietly. He sat on a rock near the entrance, his rifle resting across his knees. "I kept watch." She relaxed slightly but still looked uneasy. "Safety is an illusion. They will not stop until they have me." David studied her carefully. "You told me last night that you refused to be a prisoner. But I need to understand more, Myra. Why would the Queen's daughter risk her life to run into human territory?" Myra hesitated, her expression conflicted. She drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. "If I tell you the truth, you may regret helping me. You may even turn me in." David shook his head. "I already chose my side when I brought you here. Tell me." For a long while, Myra was silent. Her eyes seemed to look past him, as if seeing memories she would rather forget. At last, she spoke. "My mother's empire rules with strength and fear. To keep her throne secure, she makes alliances with other great houses of our people. These alliances are often sealed with marriage. I am her youngest daughter, and she chose me to be given away." David frowned. "Given away? To who?" "To an elder of the Dominion," Myra answered bitterly. "A man far older than my mother herself. A man who has crushed entire worlds under his command. She would give me to him as though I were a gift, in exchange for his fleets." The anger in her voice was sharp, yet beneath it was deep pain. David listened, his hands tightening around his rifle. He had grown up hearing stories about the alien empire's power, its endless ships, and strict codes of rule. But hearing the cost of that power spoken from Myra's own lips was different. "You did not want to accept it," David said softly. "I would rather die free in the forest than live a lifetime chained at his side," Myra said firmly. Her glowing eyes locked onto David's. I am not an object to be traded. I am not a jewel to sit in a crown. I am my own. David felt a strange respect stir within him. This was not the pampered royal he imagined. She had chosen suffering, danger, and exile instead of safety within a palace. That choice alone showed more courage than most. Still, he knew the danger was far from over. If the hunters catch you, David said carefully, they will drag you back to your mother. She will not forgive your escape. Myra's voice grew quiet. If they catch me, I will be lost forever. That is why I must keep moving. And why I must ask you to let me go. If you stay with me, they will hunt you as well. David gave a small laugh, shaking his head. Too late for that. The moment I chose to help you, I became part of this. Whether I like it or not, they will see me as your accomplice. Her eyes softened at his words. You are a fool, David. Maybe, he said with a faint smile, but sometimes fools make the best choices. For the first time, a real smile touched her lips. It was brief, but it made her seem less like a hunted royal and more like a young woman fighting for her life. The moment of calm did not last long. A distant sound carried through the forest, an unnatural hum. David tensed, instantly recognizing it. Drones, he muttered. They are sweeping the area. Myra stood, her cloak device still broken in her hands. They will find us here. We must leave. David quickly packed his gear and extinguished the lantern. Together, they moved deeper into the cave until they reached a narrow exit that opened into a small valley. The sunlight was brighter now, shining across green hills. They will expect us to hide, David said. So we do the opposite. We move fast and leave no time for them to box us in. Myra looked uncertain but nodded. She trusted his judgment. As they made their way across the valley, David guided her carefully, pointing out where to step to leave fewer tracks. Myra, though unused to such travel, followed his instructions without complaint. At one point, she stumbled on a rock, and David caught her arm before she fell. She looked at him with surprise, as though not used to being touched without ceremony or formality. He released her quickly, and they kept moving, but the moment lingered in both their minds. By midday, they reached the edge of another forest. Here, the shadows were thicker, the air cooler. They stopped to catch their breath. Myra leaned against a tree, her chest rising and falling quickly. You move like a soldier, she said, her tone almost teasing. David smirked. I am a soldier. No, she corrected, shaking her head. You move like someone who fights for more than orders. Someone who fights for survival. He met her gaze, realizing she saw more in him than most did. And you move like someone who was not meant to run through forests at all. Her lips curved faintly again, but then her expression grew serious. David, you must understand. If you continue to help me, you may become a target not only of my mother's hunters but of the empire itself. Humans and my people live in a fragile peace. By aiding me, you may be risking far more than your life. David's voice was steady. Peace built on fear is not real peace. If your empire sees me as an enemy for helping you, then so be it. Myra studied him for a long moment. Finally, she said, then I will not run alone. The sound of drones grew louder again, closer this time. David raised his weapon, scanning the trees. We keep moving. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Myra straightened, her fear replaced with determination. She stood beside him, ready to continue her escape. The hunters were drawing near, and both of them knew the chase was only beginning. But in that moment, a fragile bond had formed between a human soldier and the alien queen's daughter. A bond strong enough to face the storm that was coming. The forest was thick with shadows as David and Myra pressed forward. The hum of drones behind them grew sharper, their scanning beams sweeping across the trees like silent searchlights. Every time one of those beams cut across the branches, Myra tensed, and David pulled her lower into cover. They moved quickly, yet carefully. David knew these machines silent, patient hunters designed to flush fugitives toward squads of soldiers. He had seen them once during training, when human forces and the alien empire conducted joint drills years ago. They were precise, ruthless, and nearly impossible to shake off once they caught a trail. "We cannot outrun them," Myra whispered as they crouched beneath a fallen log. Her glowing eyes darted toward the sky where a faint shimmer showed the path of a drone. "They will track us until we collapse." David's jaw tightened. "Then we don't outrun them. We outsmart them." He scanned their surroundings. The ground dipped into a marshy lowland where fog rose from the earth. Beyond it, he spotted thick reeds and shallow water. An idea came to him. "This way." Myra hesitated but followed. They moved into the marsh, wading through cold water that reached their knees. Each step was heavy, but the fog helped conceal them. David led Myra to a cluster of reeds and pushed her down into the cover. He knelt beside her, pressing his finger to his lips for silence. A moment later, a drone passed overhead. Its red sensor beam swept across the marsh but wavered, unable to lock onto their heat signatures. The water masked them, and the fog distorted the readings. The drone hovered uncertainly before gliding away. Myra let out a soft breath of relief. "You knew the water would confuse them." David nodded. "They are machines. Machines can be tricked." For a moment, she looked at him with something close to admiration. Humans truly are unpredictable. Their brief moment of calm ended when the distant thud of boots echoed through the trees. Soldiers. The Queen's elite trackers had arrived. David's muscles tensed. These were no ordinary pursuers. The trackers were trained to follow trails through impossible terrain. If the drones could not find them, the soldiers surely would. He leaned close to Myra. "Stay low. Do exactly as I say." Together, they slipped through the marsh, careful not to make noise. Myra stumbled once on a submerged root, and David caught her before she fell with a splash. His grip steadied her, and for a moment, their eyes met. She gave a small nod of thanks, then pressed on beside him. They reached the far edge of the marsh and crawled onto firmer ground. Ahead stood a wall of rocks, a natural cliff face with cracks and narrow paths winding upward. David pointed. "We climb. It will slow them down." Myra looked doubtful. "I have never climbed before." "You will today," he said firmly. He went first, testing the stone with his hands and feet, finding stable holds. Then he guided her, showing her where to step. She struggled at first, her movements clumsy, but determination kept her from falling. Bit by bit, they climbed higher until the marsh and forest below looked small. Halfway up, Myra froze. Voices carried from below deep, commanding tones in the alien language. David pressed himself flat against the stone and motioned for her to do the same. A squad of alien trackers moved into the marsh, scanning the area. Their armor was sleek, dark, and reflective, designed to blend into the forest. Each carried a long spear-like weapon that crackled faintly with energy. They moved with discipline, their eyes sharp, their movements deliberate. Myra's breath caught. She recognized the leader, an older warrior with scars across his face. "Captain Ral," she whispered so softly David barely heard. "He has served my mother for decades. He never fails." David's mind raced. If this captain was as relentless as she claimed, then their climb would not save them for long. He glanced upward. The cliff still stretched above, but at the top he saw an overhang with dense trees. If they could reach it, they might vanish into the canopy. "Keep moving," he urged. With renewed effort, Myra climbed higher. Her hands scraped against the rock, and her breath grew harsh, but she did not stop. David stayed close, ready to catch her if she slipped. Below, the trackers spread out. One paused, kneeling near the water. He touched the ground and frowned. Even from this distance, David could tell the soldier had noticed something, the faint disturbance in the marsh where they had waited. The captain barked an order, and the squad fanned out, scanning upward. One of the soldiers lifted his weapon, pointing toward the cliff. A red beam shot across the stone, cutting just below David's boots. "Go!" David shouted. Myra scrambled faster, panic giving her strength. David climbed behind her, the beam narrowly missing his side. Stones crumbled beneath their hands as they pulled themselves higher. At last, they reached the top and rolled onto the forest floor. David grabbed Myra's hand and pulled her into the trees, weaving through the undergrowth. Behind them, shouts echoed as the trackers began their climb. They ran until their lungs burned. Only when they reached a deep ravine did David stop. He pulled Myra down behind a fallen tree. Both of them gasped for air, sweat dripping down their faces. Myra looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "They will not stop, David. Ral will chase us across worlds if he must." David steadied his breathing. "Then we make it hard for him. He may have the soldiers, but we have something he doesn't." "What is that?" Myra asked. "Willpower," David said. "And the knowledge that we're fighting for freedom, not orders." Myra's expression softened. She stared at him for a moment before nodding. "Then I will fight with you." David checked his weapon, making sure it was ready. "Good. Because from here on, it only gets harder." The distant sound of the trackers climbing the cliff reached their ears. The chase was far from over. But in that moment, David knew something important. Myra was not just a burden to protect. She was becoming his partner in survival. Together, they would have to stay one step ahead of the hunters. And together, they would discover just how far courage and trust could take them. The forest stretched for miles, but David knew they could not keep running forever. The hunters would not tire. The drones would not rest. If they wanted to survive, they needed a place where they could disappear and regroup. By late afternoon, the trees began to thin, revealing broken ground scattered with rusting metal and stone. Myra stopped, her eyes widening at the strange sight. "What is this place?" David crouched beside a bent metal beam half buried in the dirt. "An old mining station. Humans built it decades ago before the Empire claimed this land. When the mines dried up, everyone left. It's been abandoned ever since." The station looked like a skeleton. Tall towers leaned at odd angles, their lights long dead. Metal pipes and broken machines lay scattered across the rocky hills. The wind whistled through hollow tunnels, making the place feel haunted. But to David, it was perfect. "No one comes here," he said. "That means it's the best chance we have." Myra followed him cautiously inside the ruins. The ground crunched with old wires and shattered glass. David led her to a control room half buried in the hillside. The door groaned but opened when he forced it. Inside, dust covered every surface. Broken panels lined the walls, and a faint smell of rust filled the air. Myra stepped carefully across the floor, her eyes scanning the remains. "This place is forgotten." "Exactly," David said. "Which means we can use it?" She tilted her head. "Use it? These machines are broken." David sat down heavily, setting his weapon aside. "Maybe broken to me. But not to you. You grew up around technology far beyond what humans make. If anyone can bring something here back to life, it's you." Myra blinked, surprised by his words. "You would trust me with this?" He gave a small shrug. "I trust that you don't want to be caught. So yes." Her lips curved slightly as she knelt by one of the panels. She brushed away dust and placed her hand on the cracked surface. A faint glow responded to her touch, though weak and flickering. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. The systems are damaged, but not dead. I may be able to reactivate some functions. David watched as she worked, her fingers dancing over the alien-like interface. Her royal upbringing had not taught her how to run through forests or climb cliffs, but here she shone. He could see the focus in her eyes, the way she read the flow of energy through the circuits as though it were music. Minutes passed, then a panel sparked and lit faintly. A weak hum filled the room. Myra smiled for the first time since they had met. The security grid still has power. I can restore some defenses. David raised his brows. Defenses? Yes, she said firmly. Drones, automated locks, maybe even shield emitters. If we stay here, we can make this place harder for the hunters to breach. David chuckled softly. And I thought you were only good at politics. Her eyes narrowed playfully. Do not underestimate me, human. For the next hour, they worked side by side. David reinforced broken doors with scrap metal while Myra coaxed weak power lines to life. By evening, they had a small safe zone. The lights flickered weakly, but they gave warmth and comfort in the dark room. When they finally sat to rest, David handed Myra a ration bar from his pack. She examined it curiously before taking a small bite. Her face twisted at the taste. Your food is plain. David laughed. It keeps you alive. That's enough. She smirked faintly, setting the wrapper aside. I suppose freedom does not taste sweet at first. The room grew quiet after that. The only sound was the hum of the repaired systems. Myra leaned back against the wall, her expression softening. You risk everything by helping me, she said quietly. Your commanders would call you a traitor if they knew. Why do you do it? David thought for a long moment. Because I've seen enough people lose their choices in life. Soldiers forced into battles they never wanted. Families pushed from their homes by power they couldn't fight. You remind me of them. You're just trying to decide your own path. Myra's glowing eyes met his. No one has ever said that to me. To my people, I am not a person. I am a symbol, a tool. But you, she paused, her voice softer. You see me as more. David held her gaze but did not answer. He didn't need to. Their fragile peace was broken by a sudden sound outside, the crunch of movement on gravel. David instantly grabbed his rifle and motioned for Myra to stay low. He crept to the doorway and peered into the night. 3 figures moved cautiously between the broken towers. They carried lanterns, their light swaying with each step. For a moment, David thought they were enemy scouts, but as they drew closer, he saw the difference. Their clothes were ragged, their equipment patched together from scraps. These were not hunters. They were scavengers. The leader, a tall man with a scarred face, called out in a rough voice. I know you're there. We saw your lights. Come out and show yourselves. David tightened his grip on his rifle. Myra whispered behind him, they are not with my mother's soldiers. But can we trust them? David hesitated. Scavengers could be dangerous. But they also knew how to survive in places no one else would dare enter. That made them valuable allies if they could be convinced. He stepped into the open, his weapon lowered but ready. We don't want trouble, David said firmly. Just passing through. The scavenger leader eyed him suspiciously. Humans don't come out here anymore. And you, his gaze shifted to Myra, who had stepped reluctantly into the lantern light. His eyes widened. That's no human. Who is she? Myra's posture stiffened. David answered quickly. She's with me. That's all you need to know. The leader smirked. Looks like trouble follows you, soldier. David met his eyes steadily. Maybe. But trouble also pays well if handled right. You help us, and you might find reward when the time comes. The scavenger chuckled at that, intrigued. Interesting offer. Behind him, his companions shifted uneasily, whispering to one another. It was clear they recognized Myra's value, even if they did not know her true identity. Finally, the leader nodded. "We'll hear your terms inside. But if you cross us, soldier, no defenses will save you." David gave a small nod and stepped aside, allowing them in. Myra gave him a questioning look, but he whispered, "Sometimes the best way to survive is to find allies where you least expect them." As the scavengers entered the ruined station, Myra realized David was right. For now, survival meant trust, fragile, uncertain trust. But it was better than standing alone against the Empire's hunters. The scavengers stayed close to the fire they had built inside the ruined mining station. The weak flames danced against broken walls, casting long shadows across the room. Myra sat silently in the corner, her glowing eyes fixed on the strangers, while David remained near her, his rifle resting across his lap. The leader of the scavengers, a man who had introduced himself as Corin, leaned forward with a crooked smile. "You two are far from home. A human soldier and, whatever she is. Quite the pair." "She is with me," David said firmly. His eyes stayed locked on Corin, unwilling to let the man's words unsettle Myra. Corin's grin widened. "I don't doubt it. But out here, people don't survive long without help. You need supplies, shelter, maybe transport. Lucky for you, we know these lands better than anyone." David could hear the unspoken message. Help always came with a price. He glanced at Myra, who kept her expression unreadable. "What do you want in return?" Corin spread his hands as if the answer were obvious. "Credits, gear, maybe favors. We're not greedy." His gaze lingered on Myra, sharp and calculating. "Of course, sometimes the most valuable things can't be bought." David's grip tightened on his weapon. "She's not for trade." Corin chuckled, shaking his head. "Relax, soldier. I'm just saying she looks important. Important people draw attention, and attention is dangerous." Myra finally spoke, her voice calm but strong. "Then help us leave this place. If you fear the attention we bring, you should want us gone quickly." Corin studied her, clearly impressed by her poise. Then he nodded. "Fair enough. At first light, we'll guide you to a safe route north. From there, you'll be on your own." David didn't trust him, but they had little choice. For now, they would accept his offer. Morning came gray and cold. The scavengers packed quickly, moving with the efficiency of people who had lived on the run their entire lives. Corin led the way, his men spread out to watch the terrain. David and Myra followed closely, their steps cautious. At first, the path seemed safe. They moved through rocky hills, staying under cover as much as possible. Myra whispered once, "Perhaps they truly mean to help." David shook his head slightly. "Trust, but never fully. Survival makes people do desperate things." His warning soon proved true. By midday, Corin raised his hand, signaling for the group to stop. They stood on a ridge overlooking a dry riverbed. "We'll rest here," he said. David's instincts screamed at him. The place was too open, too exposed. He glanced at Myra, and she seemed to sense it too. Her hand hovered near the small tool she carried from the mining station. Before either of them could act, Corin's men raised their weapons. David spun, bringing his rifle up, but a sharp strike to the back knocked it from his hands. Myra gasped as two scavengers grabbed her arms, pulling her back. Corin stepped forward, his smile now cold and cruel. "You're right, soldier. She's not for trade. She's worth far more than that." David's heart pounded. "You're making a mistake." "Am I?" Corin laughed. "The Empire pays well for runaways. And for those who help them. Delivering the queen's daughter will buy us more than a lifetime of scraps. Myra struggled against the men holding her. You don't understand. If you return me, you will be nothing but her pawns. She will use you and discard you. Corin sneered. Better her pawn than her prey. David lunged at the nearest scavenger, landing a solid punch, but another slammed a rifle butt into his ribs. Pain shot through him, knocking him to the ground. He tried to rise, but a heavy boot pressed him down. Myra cried out, reaching toward him, but her captors dragged her back. Take them, Corin ordered. The Empire will reward us. Hours later, David awoke in chains. His wrists were bound with metal cuffs, and his head throbbed from the blow he had taken. Around him, the scavengers' camp had shifted. They were no longer moving north, they had changed course, heading toward the signal fires of an approaching alien patrol. Myra sat bound across from him, her face pale but her eyes burning with anger. I told you, she whispered bitterly. They would betray us. David gritted his teeth. I should have seen it sooner. He tugged at the cuffs, but they held firm. Corin strolled into view, smug as ever. Don't take it personally. Out here, survival is business. And you two are the most valuable cargo I've ever carried. David glared up at him. The Empire won't thank you. They'll use you once, then throw you aside. Corin shrugged. Maybe. But even one reward is worth more than this miserable life. I'll take my chances. Myra lifted her chin, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. You sell your honor for scraps. That makes you poorer than anyone. Corin's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning. Honor doesn't keep you alive. He walked away, leaving guards to watch them. As night fell, David shifted closer to Myra. His ribs ached, but his mind worked furiously. We can't wait for rescue. We have to free ourselves before they hand us over. Myra nodded, lowering her voice. I still have my tool. They did not search me well. She twisted her wrist slightly, revealing a thin device hidden in her sleeve. It can cut through wires and locks, but I cannot reach my cuffs without help. David's eyes sharpened. Then we work together. Slowly, he maneuvered closer until their wrists touched. Myra slid the tool into his bound hands. A faint spark lit as the device hummed, slicing into the metal cuffs. The process was slow, and every second felt like an eternity. Finally, with a soft snap, the cuff broke. David rubbed his sore wrists, then quickly freed Myra. She let out a relieved breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since capture. But before they could move, a shadow fell across them. One of the guards had turned, his eyes narrowing. What are you? David lunged, tackling him before he could shout. They struggled, fists striking in the dirt. The guard swung wildly, but David's desperation gave him strength. He knocked the weapon free and struck the man unconscious. Myra grabbed the weapon and tossed it to David. Her voice was urgent. We must run now. The others will hear. David nodded, gripping the rifle tightly. He met her gaze, and for a moment, there was no fear between them, only resolve. They sprinted into the night, leaving the camp behind. Shouts erupted as the scavengers discovered their escape. But it was too late. David and Myra were already gone, fleeing into the dark with freedom burning in their hearts. The night air was sharp and cold as David and Myra ran across the barren hills. Their footsteps echoed softly on the dry earth, but every sound seemed louder because they knew the scavengers were behind them. Shouts carried through the darkness, followed by the barking of orders. Torches and searchlights flickered in the distance. David kept his grip tight on the stolen rifle while Myra ran beside him with surprising speed, her long steps graceful even on the rough ground. She breathed heavily, but her glowing eyes stayed alert, scanning the shadows for danger. They won't stop chasing us, David muttered. Not while they think you're worth a fortune. Myra nodded. Then we must stop them first. Running forever is not survival. David admired her calmness, even now. She wasn't just an alien princess, she was someone who understood danger and had the courage to face it. They slowed when they reached a line of rocks jutting out like broken teeth. David pulled Myra down behind one of the larger stones. We need a plan. If they surround us, it's over. Myra tilted her head as if listening to something far away. Then she whispered, the Empire's patrols are close. I can sense the energy of their machines. If the scavengers bring us to them, we will be trapped between both sides. David frowned. So either way, they'll catch us. Unless we turn the two against each other, Myra said. Her words sparked an idea in David's mind. He glanced back toward the flickering lights of the scavengers. If they think we're near the patrol, they'll push forward too fast. Maybe we can use that. Myra's eyes glowed brighter, as though she approved of his thinking. Then we must strike carefully. They waited in silence until the scavenger group drew closer. David counted 6 figures moving in the dark. They spread out, weapons ready, scanning the rocks. Their leader, Corin, walked in front, confident and determined. David took a deep breath. Stay low. When I signal, move toward the east ridge. I'll draw their fire. Myra's hand brushed his arm, stopping him. No. We fight together. You are strong, but alone you will not last long. Her words carried no hesitation. David met her gaze and saw that she meant it. He gave a quick nod. Together, then. The scavengers moved closer. David raised the rifle and fired a sharp burst into the air. The shots echoed across the hills, and the scavengers immediately dropped for cover. Corin shouted, there they are. Don't let them get away. Gunfire erupted. Dust and stone exploded around David and Myra as bullets struck the rocks. Myra crouched beside him, then pressed her hand against the ground. A faint hum filled the air, and the soil shifted slightly as if it answered her command. A low wall of loose rock slid together, forming a barrier that shielded them. David stared at her, astonished. You can control the ground. Only small things, she said quickly, her voice strained. But it may be enough. The scavengers advanced, firing as they moved. David leaned over the barrier and returned fire, forcing them to scatter. Myra focused on weakening the ground beneath their feet. One scavenger suddenly shouted as the earth gave way, dropping him into a shallow pit. The others hesitated, startled by the sudden collapse. Now, David said. He and Myra rushed out from behind the barrier, moving fast. David shot at their pursuers, forcing them to duck. Myra struck one with the butt of a stolen weapon, her movements sharp and precise. But Corin was waiting. He stepped out from cover and raised his gun at Myra. Enough games. You're mine now. David saw it too late. He fired, but his shot went wide. Corin pulled the trigger, and Myra stumbled as the blast grazed her arm. She fell to one knee, gasping. David charged, slamming into Corin before he could fire again. The two men struggled in the dust, fists and elbows striking hard. Corin was tough, hardened by years of scavenger life, but David fought with the desperation of someone with everything to lose. Finally, David landed a crushing blow that sent Corin sprawling. He grabbed Myra's hand, pulling her up. Come on, we're not done yet. They ran again, leaving the broken scavenger leader behind. But the others were still on their heels. The night opened into a wide plain, lit faintly by the glow of alien patrol lights in the distance. Machines hummed like thunder, moving steadily closer. We can't go toward them, David said. The patrol will trap us. Myra's eyes narrowed. Then we must make the scavengers run straight into them. David realized what she meant. He raised his rifle and fired toward the patrol lights. The shots echoed, and sparks flew high into the sky. The scavengers shouted, mistaking the flashes for a signal. "They're over here," one of them yelled. In their eagerness, the scavengers pushed forward at full speed. They no longer cared about stealth. Their torches burned bright, and their weapons blazed as they charged across the plain. Moments later, the alien patrol noticed. Beams of harsh blue light cut through the darkness, locking onto the scavengers. Mechanical voices shouted in the alien tongue, ordering them to drop their weapons. The scavengers froze, too late to escape. Corin stumbled into view, still limping from the fight. His face twisted with rage as he spotted David and Myra in the distance. "This isn't over," he screamed before the patrol seized him and his men. David pulled Myra into the cover of the rocks once again. Together, they watched as the patrol disarmed the scavengers and marched them away in chains. Myra let out a long breath. "They are taken. For now, we are safe." David lowered his rifle, his chest still heaving. "Safe, but not free. The Empire is still here. They'll keep searching." Myra touched the wound on her arm, wincing. "We must move quickly, before they notice us." David tore a strip from his sleeve and bound her wound tightly. His hands worked carefully, and Myra watched him in silence. When he finished, she whispered, "You protect me as if I were one of your own." He met her gaze. "You are. We're in this together, no matter what comes." Myra's eyes softened, glowing faintly in the night. She gave a small nod. "Then we will survive. Together." They turned away from the captured scavengers and the advancing patrol lights. With the plain behind them and new dangers ahead, they vanished into the dark hills, determined to keep moving. Their fight was far from over. But for the first time since their escape began, they carried not only fear, but also hope. The forest stretched endlessly, dark and quiet under the night sky. David and Myra moved quickly, their muscles aching from the chase and the previous fights. Yet they pressed on, knowing that any pause could mean capture. David paused at the top of a hill, scanning the terrain below. "The patrol will be looking for us soon," he whispered. His breath fogged in the cold night air. "We need a place to make our last stand, somewhere we can control the fight." Myra nodded, her glowing eyes reflecting determination. "There is a canyon ahead," she said. "Narrow, with rocky walls. Few can climb in or out quickly. We can use it to our advantage." David studied the map in his mind, recalling the rough terrain they had passed. "It will work," he said. "We can force them into a trap." They approached the canyon as dawn broke, the first pale light painting the rocks in orange and gold. David led Myra to a spot where two narrow paths converged. "We wait here," he said. "The patrol will have to follow one of these paths. If they do, we can control the fight." Myra glanced at him. "And if there are too many?" David shook his head. "Then we fight. But we will fight on our terms." Hours passed as they hid among the rocks. Birds called in the distance, and the wind whispered through the canyon. David kept his rifle ready while Myra scanned the horizon with her sharp alien senses. They spoke little, conserving energy, trusting the other's presence as reassurance. Finally, the hum of the patrol reached their ears. Red and blue lights flickered between the canyon walls. The patrol moved slowly, cautious, expecting to find only empty terrain. But David and Myra were ready. He whispered to Myra, "Wait until they are deep inside. Then we strike." She nodded, her glowing eyes fixed on the approaching machines. The first patrol unit entered the narrow canyon. Their movement was careful, but predictable. David signaled Myra. With synchronized precision, they acted. David fired the first shot, aimed to disable the patrol's sensors without alerting the whole group immediately. Sparks flew as one machine malfunctioned, falling forward with a loud crash. The patrol stopped, confusion rippling through their ranks. Myra moved swiftly, using her tool to jam the patrol's communication devices. Machines wavered, their orders delayed. David and Myra struck from hidden positions, disabling several units before they could organize. The patrol's leader, a tall figure in advanced armor, finally realized the trap. "Intruders," it shouted in a mechanical, amplified voice. "Eliminate them." David and Myra ducked behind rocks as energy beams shot through the air. The canyon echoed with the sound of blasts, ricochets, and shouts. David fired accurately, striking weak points in the machine's armor. Myra moved silently, disabling units with precise strikes. Together, they were unstoppable, a perfect team. Despite their skill, the patrol continued advancing. David realized they needed to end the fight quickly. "Myra, we lure them toward the cliff edge. They won't expect it." Myra's eyes sparkled with understanding. She moved to a higher rock, attracting the patrol's attention. Beams focused on her, but she dodged with speed no human could match. David waited for the right moment, then fired at the supports of a rocky overhang above the patrol. With a thunderous crack, the rocks collapsed, blocking the path behind the patrol and creating chaos. Machines stumbled and fell, their sensors blinded by dust and debris. David grabbed Myra's hand. "Now," he shouted. They sprinted through the canyon, leaping over rubble and broken machines. The patrol was trapped, slowed by the rocks, unable to follow. Behind them, the echoes of their mechanical pursuers faded. Hours later, David and Myra reached a high plateau overlooking the forest below. They paused, catching their breath. Below, the canyon narrowed again, ensuring that no patrol could follow without great effort. For the first time in days, they felt the possibility of safety. Myra leaned against a rock, her glowing eyes softening. "We did it," she said quietly. David smiled, though his body ached. "Not just yet. But we've earned a chance to be free." She looked at him, gratitude and admiration shining in her eyes. "You saved me, David. Not just from the Empire, but from a life I never wanted." David shook his head. "You saved yourself, Myra. I just helped. That's all anyone can do." Her hand brushed his shoulder briefly, a silent acknowledgement of trust and connection. The sound of wind carried down from the plateau. The sun rose higher, spilling golden light across the forest, chasing away the night's shadows. For David and Myra, the world felt different now. The danger was not over. More patrols could arrive, the Empire could still send hunters, but they had proven they could survive together. Myra looked out over the forest. "I never imagined freedom would feel like this. Open, vast, alive." David nodded. "It's a start. And as long as we stay together, we can face whatever comes next." She turned to him. "Then let us move forward. We have time now to plan, to reach lands where the Empire's reach is weaker." David lifted his rifle one last time, scanning the horizon. "We keep moving, always. But for today, we take a breath. We survived." Myra smiled faintly, the first true smile in weeks. "Together." David offered his hand. She took it firmly. Side by side, they descended from the plateau, leaving the canyon behind. With every step, they moved farther from capture, farther from the Empire's control. The journey was not over, but for the first time, the path ahead seemed theirs to choose. With courage, trust, and determination, the human soldier and the alien princess walked into a world where freedom was possible. As the sun climbed higher, the forest stretched endlessly before them, full of life and promise. They were not just survivors, they were allies, friends, and warriors who had carved their own destiny.